welcome to another powerful and prolific conversation here at the Nuance Conversation. My name is George Hurt. I am the creator and curator of this space. This space is meant to be a place where we have nuanced conversations. We operate in the gray, not the black and white here. And we have one of the greatest minds, one of the greatest preachers and pastors, brother beloved that is here with us. You all know him. I don't even got to, you know how Ali was like, they know. Dr. Michael Fisher, the wonderful and esteemed pastor of the Greater Zion Baptist Church in the wonderful city of Compton, California, but he's expanded there even in Corona and various parts. So we'll learn so much about him. We want to dig in today, but I got to swear you in. Do you swear? You got to raise your hand and play along with us.
Are we kidding right now? That's not scripture saying we have to swear to
ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're going to be dealing with. Non-compliance.
Absolutely, on brand. Yeah, I'm going to be the roughest guest he's had, for sure.
This will definitely be just a feel of what we're about to get into.
Okay, I promise.
To just, be nuanced in this conversation.
To be nuanced in this conversation.
That's
to be
all.
great.
It's just a playful thing to say
great.
here that we will talk about religion, politics.
All of it.
Social norms and pop culture here, obviously with a Christian spiritual bit. How you feeling today, bro?
Man, I'm feeling good, man. I'm here with you, big bro.
Yeah, man.
Hold on. How old are we?
That is nobody in this nuanced conversation business.
Great. Great. We 40-ish.
Yeah, 40-ish. At that point where you're too young to be old, too old to be young.
Yeah. I'm saying that because I call him big bro because literally he's bigger than me.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. It has nothing to do with the status or length on earth.
He's a genius. I'm like nervous to even be here, bro.
Yeah, you nervous. That's funny. Man, tell us what you've been up to lately.
Man, you know what? So I think this is so interesting because, as you know, I kind of been off the scene for a second. And that happened because my dad died and my mom passed away. A lot of people don't know that, I went through some personal stuff as well, endured a separation, and then, just rebounded from that. And now I'm back, pastoring. I got a conference coming up, my first conference that I'm doing. Of course, I've been a dad.
Yeah. Well, let's not slip through that because we want to plug that.
Yes.
Even though this may be aired later, but we still want to plug the Pivot Conference.
Yes, yeah, because the Pivot Conference is a part of a bigger thing, which is the Fisher brand. Yeah, so I've been working on the Fisher brand, my LLC, where I'm a branding consultant. So I do my best to try to help people take what it is they're doing and making it marketable, especially in the area of social media, and especially like with the religious space, because folks is just posting stuff and I'm like, the angle is horrible. So anyway, so the Fisher brand, I've been working on that. My CDC, been working on that, a couple of grants that we received, so we do a mentor program, and then of course Pastor in Greater Zion, which now is in 2 locations, and we're actually getting ready to expand to 2 more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where would those be?
The next location is going to be Santa Clarita. So it'll be a GZ Santa Clarita, and then it'll be a GZ Houston.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It does not look like me doing it, for sure. I'm actually taking a page out of like the friends that you have. You know what I'm saying? The ones that are our clear cousins. And just sending out, campus pastors that share the heart. But we all kind of like share from the same menu. So them knowing like what the theme is every year, knowing kind of what I'm focusing on each month, and then, but of course, allowing them in the spirit to cook up something on their own. So I have a campus pastor in Corona. So GZ Corona is off of actually Compton Avenue in Ontario.
Ironically,
ironically. Pastor Jay Bolden, he's doing a great job. So he leads that. I'm going to name the campus pastor for Santa Clarita in December of this year. And then we're actually merging with another pastor in Houston that has always been an ally of GZ, but he sees the significance, I guess, of coming together
Mm-hmm.
and saying, hey, man, I'll be the campus pastor and I don't want to do the day-to-day work stuff. So that's
Yeah,
how
that's
that's going to
powerful,
be.
man. Great model for taking and expanding the kingdom, especially in Los Angeles.
Following you, bro,
Oh man,
because you're doing 2 churches
Yeah, we're trying. Yeah, we're trying.
and you're the one doing it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So what you're doing is a more healthy model for a lot of reasons. For a lot of
Yeah.
reasons, not just mentally and physically and task wise, but also kingdom wise, because it is brand centered, not personality centered.
Correct.
Even though you are the shaper of all that, you're empowering other men and women as leaders of these campuses to do the work of ministry. Well, we're going to dive more into that, but I think it'll be great to learn more about you. You're originally from Los Angeles. Tell us about
Yep.
growing up, your childhood, and ultimately your profession of faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So first of all, everyone that's listening, let me tell you something. Pastor Hurt don't tell you nothing that you're getting yourself into. I have no idea how this conversation is going to go. Here we are about to dive into my childhood, and he's just sitting here. Do y'all video this? Do you? Are you going to show this on YouTube? All right, you gonna exit out the flip flops, but you gonna show it on YouTube.
Flip flops are going down, man. What's how we rocking it, baby?
Right. You see how much he's enjoying this right now? Okay, he about to Dr. Film me. All right, anyway.
Not at all.
So I was born here in Inglewood, California,
Yeah, I got you.
at a hospital that don't even exist anymore, Daniel Freeman.
Daniel Freeman, yeah.
Yep, Daniel Freeman Hospital. And then, of course, grew up in Carson, California, which was adjacent to Compton, California.
Mm-hmm.
And then grew up, of course, at Little Zion Missionary Baptist Church, where my father established that church, which is the first black church in Compton.
Wow.
And we'll get into that too. His father, which founded 103rd Street Baptist Church in Watts, moved it to Lime Avenue on the east side of Compton, and now calls it Citizen of Zion, where B.T. Newman was the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up in Little Zion and grew up in Carson. My family is from Compton, so of course I spent a lot of time in Compton as well. And
How was Compton growing up? Because I know there was a shift in it. How was it growing up when you were growing up?
well, you know what, man? It's crazy because, people that are from the outside looking in, they think that people that grew up around that area, Compton, Watts, Carson, all of that, that we have these horrible memories of, being shot at every 5 minutes. Actually, man, I can smell the grass on Saturday, of the gardener, or whoever is cutting the grass. It's hot. Ain't nobody got no air. Everybody outside. And yeah, you got people walking down the street with their 40s, but they're like, what's up, little, whatever. So, I mean, you did know the blocks that you weren't supposed to be on.
Right.
The main problem was the police, and we've cleaned that up for a good part. But the main part and the part that was violent was really the police, not so much the gangs, as much as it was the police. So growing up in that, it was a very tight knit city, and people don't notice about Compton. It still is a very tight knit city.
Right.
They honor families that were there from like conception when black people moved there. So the Fisher name, the Fisher family, the legacy there is strong in Compton.
Wow.
Many of the leaders came through Little Zion. Of course, the church was the first black church there. And so growing up, I have nothing but great memories.
Wow.
Unfortunately, of course, growing up in LA, period, you go through your tragedies. I've had friends shot and killed right there on Crenshaw, where the Pontiac dealership used to be, across from the Wiener Schnitzel, where they filmed The Boys in the Hood. I think out of 10 of my friends that I had, I want to say maybe one is alive.
Wow.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I've endured all of that. But for the most part, I have nothing but great memories of growing up in Compton, Carson, Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think people are not aware, like, home is home.
Yeah.
Like, and memories are eclectic. There are bad memories and there's good memories. That's true of the suburbs. That's true if you were built in a gated community, and we see what happened with the famous rap mogul and his home and his kids.
Yeah.
tragedy seeps in different ways, in various ways, but
Yep.
when you're growing up in the midst of it, that's not how you process it.
Yeah.
You remember the friendships, the relationships, you work through those bad moments,
Yeah.
and you look back, and many people survive it
hmm
and become better. Some get caught up in it and not better, but you still love them equally.
Yeah.
You know, it's still that love is still there. I wouldn't say equally, but the love is still there.
Yeah.
For the roots and the memories.
Well, I grew up understanding that, the sense of community, so, and understanding the code of what people that are outside of our community don't understand. So on TV and on the news, it just looks like random people is just being gunned down every day. And while that does happen,
It does.
right, we do know that. For the most part, we also understand if you grew up in LA or Southside Chicago or wherever, you understand the code of the streets too.
You do.
And a lot of times those things that people felt like we had to always duck and dodge, you knew how to walk
You know how to
it.
move.
You know how to move.
you
Like
know
they
how to
knew who I
maneuver.
was. They knew
Yeah.
you the preacher kid. No,
Yeah.
you can't come. Don't come over
Exactly.
right now.
Yeah.
You too anointed. They was
Yeah.
like, your daddy gonna kill us.
Yeah, and if you got a basketball player that's progressing,
They
you
shield
can't
them.
come.
Yeah.
You shield them.
You stay over there.
Yeah,
You got a future.
Yeah, you always have that reality of it. When you think about the church life growing up,
Yeah.
not just in Compton but in LA in general, can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that LA now has changed tremendously compared to the LA culture that I grew up in. So all I can remember, of course, with my dad, and shout out to Dr. W. Jerome Fisher.
Yes,
He's
sir.
in heaven, reaping his reward. But he was a legend. Right. So I was fortunate to hang out with other legends, Dr. E.V. Hill,
Yeah,
Dr. Henry Lyons, and when he
Yeah.
was the president of the National Baptist Convention and stuff like that. But in Los Angeles, during that time of like the late 80s, which is where I start remembering, into like the mid 90s, man, there was such a level of camaraderie and family and brotherhood amongst the clergy and the churches.
yeah,
So any given Sunday, first of all, you went to church every Sunday all day, as you know.
yeah,
Everybody had a 7:30. Everyone had an early morning service, a mid-morning
and
service,
the evening service.
and an afternoon service,
Yeah.
right? And so I just remember coming up, church being church. Folks came in there to have it. They breaking out, they shouting, they having a great time. Then you leave from there and you're going to go to somebody's church, and it's 4 of the churches on. It's packed. You can't get in there. It's hot, no AC, but you excited to be there because your
Yeah.
choir going to kill.
Yeah,
And then you heard other pastors preach, and you excited to hear them because, while you knew your pastor could deliver the word, you also knew that you could get a word from them as well. So coming up in the climate of LA, many revivals, a lot of concerts, fellowship, afternoon programs, pastoral anniversaries. I feel like LA was like jumping when
Yeah.
it came about church. But of course, that was a generation that during that time, they were in the helm and in the driver's seat of the culture. And all of them were descendants of Louisiana, Texas, the Midwest, down south that migrated out here.
Yeah, so you got 1 or 2, maybe max 3 generations of Southern people. So you basically got the Southern hospitality and
Exactly.
fellowship among. That's a very introspective, intelligent way to look at it when you think about changing, because now you got 4, 5, 6 generations of separate from that social norm to the more city life
Absolutely.
concept. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think LA, my dad said that, LA has always been the playboy city, right? Hollywood, we all know that it deals with, of course, the spiritual entity that's over it, that's about glamour and, partying. And it's always something to do in LA. And I tell pastors all the time that if you never compare the numbers in your church in LA to the numbers in people's churches down south and back east,
Yeah.
especially down south, because they're still closed on Sunday and stuff like that. LA, there's a zillion things to do.
Exactly.
So if someone decides to not go to the zillion things to come and hear you preach, get on up there and be appreciative, because they bypass 17 things to fill up their schedule to come and listen to you for 2 hours or
Yeah.
whatever. So, but I think that the old generation that came from the South and honored that old school coming up, they've passed away. And then a lot of them have moved back. A lot of them have retired.
Because of cost, yeah.
Yeah, so we're now with the generation that all they know is to go have fun. So I think that's why the climate has shifted a little bit.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You're uniquely gifted and talented, and you're in church. What was the metamorphosis process of saying, "Hey, I'm here with people, but I'm also like have these unique abilities"? Were you like that kid that was standing on the yellow pages doing stuff, or was you laid back for a while and then had to force it out of you? I think I know the answer, but I'll go ahead and just play along with the question.
So, I mean, this is infamous. Every teacher always told my mom, Michael is such a great student. He's a studier. I mean, he's going to get the homework done. He's a joy to have in the class. If we could just get him to just be quiet and stop disturbing everybody else with his jokes.
Really?
That would be great. So my report card used to be, A, S.
Yes. We had 3s in Detroit. So yeah, I know.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, I got great grades academically, but that whole like compliant to like sitting in class and being still or being quiet, it's not that. I think for a second they tried to say I had like ADD or something like that, but my mom was like, he ain't got no ADD.
Yeah.
He didn't sit his
Today
behind
you
him.
would be on medicine and stuff.
For sure, Ritalin, right? So I always thought I was a superhero. I always believed in like superpowers. I always thought that we were something greater than, who we really were, that we just need to tap into it and find out. I always wanted to be a mutant, I always thought I was, Cyclops or somebody, Wolverine. So you take that personality, right? And then you take it to church and then you plug that personality into the narrative of a supernatural God that says that you can do supernatural things and voila, then you get me. And so I always had a problem with people that were going to church to all become clones of each other. I just always had a problem with it. So I was always like, why?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Clones of each other. Like I always had a problem with people that would come to church and all of a sudden, you don't dress like that. You know you can't stand suits.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden you forcing yourself to get in the suit, so that the people, the deacons and stuff will pat you on the back and say, oh, look at you, I see a change.
Yeah.
So I always had a problem with that. And I used to always ask my dad, like, why do we do that? Why do we do that? Why? And I mean, there would be several times my dad would just be like, Michael, will you just please be quiet? But I always kind of resisted the norm. Always. I would be like, I don't understand. Why do I have to put this armband on my arm? I mean, I would do it if you explain it to me, but I never was the kid that would just do it just because you said so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that has always been me. And then my father taught me a long time ago, every gift that you have comes from God, and so you should use it. So I decided to do that, even though I started preaching and pastors and preachers would tell me, stop doing that. You can't sing. You can't dance, choreography and all of that stuff. And I was like, well, God gave it to me. You mad because you can't. So I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So I've always been that kid. Always, bro.
What was your first time you can remember doing something in church up front and getting that, getting that feeling of satisfaction, that joy for doing it and seeing people engage in it? And because part of what we do is connected to how we can make others feel in light of what we do as well. When was your first time having that feeling?
Okay, so it's weird because for me in church, I don't think I ever have received the feeling of like, ooh, look at how, how this is making them feel. Because I'm always like terrified about, but did I please God? Right. And even when I was a little boy, my first time that I got up to give a theme speech was like I was 8 years old. And I remember talking from Genesis chapter 1 in the beginning. And I can't really remember it all to this day, but I do remember people shouting and running out the church.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment forward, thinking like, oh, this is pretty powerful, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like when you talk about God, you know, and you talk about him right,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, the people like experience something. I couldn't put it into words then, but I actually ran from it from that moment.
Really?
Yeah. Because I was just like, that's too much pressure.
Wow.
And then everyone after church, like, you're going to be just like your daddy. Oh, you know, I knew you was called. God's got great things in your life. I'm like, okay, y'all doing way too much. I'm just in the second grade.
Yeah.
You know, so I even from that time forward,
Just in the second
you know,
grade is
they
crazy.
like, you know, we want to ask your son to do. We want you to do the welcome. We want you to do the response to the welcome. We want you to do. We want you to be the theme speaker. You know, and I was like, no, I don't want to do it, Mom. You know, we want you to be in the play. I don't want to do it. So after that one time, I actually went in my shell for a second.
Musically, what was your first interaction?
First time was I sung at a school play. And I sung Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound. And I remember being nervous. And when I got up there, I closed my eyes, and with all I had, you know, I just belted it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the people just like started applauding. My whole family sings.
Mm-hmm.
My dad sings. All my sisters and brothers on my dad's side, they all sing.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest sister, she's passed away, but she was one of the writers and founders of the group War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she wrote the song Slipping in the Darkness,
Mm-hmm.
and she wrote the song War. And so, you know, listening to them sing, you know, you're really nervous. You kind of feel like you're coming up in the Gospel Jacksons.
Yeah.
But I belted it out, and, you know, they gave me an applause and did a whole standing ovation and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was when I said, oh, I like this feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I like that. So
Yeah.
then from there, they started having me lead in the children's choir at the church, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would do the pageants that they had at school. Yeah, but even in singing, I didn't like ever sing. I never liked singing like the slow stuff, you know, like the traditional stuff. I was always attracted to. I mean, we're in the generation of the Michael Jacksons, Prince, Janet. So I wanted to do that. I knew I could dance, and I wanted to always be an artist that could like sing and dance, like straight out 8 counts. And so that didn't happen until I got older.
So yeah, that's my next question. Like, how are you marrying those in context of church? But you just said it didn't happen till you get older. Was you ever given an opportunity to then suppress, or you just never flowed?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was frowned upon to do all that dancing in church, especially if you were a guy, you know? So, I mean, it was like, absolutely not, you know? So I suppressed it for a long time. I suppressed it until I got a record deal with Shep Crawford, who's now a pastor, Shep Crawford. But when I met him, he was still a mega producer who produced for Tamia and Deborah Cox and all of them. And at that moment, he was doing something with the background dancers for a show I had coming up. And like, I learned the 8 count, and he was like, yo, you can dance? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, why don't you? And I was like, because they tell me I'm not supposed to. You know, I'm a pastor and all of that. And so he was like, you know what? Go ahead, dance. So he wrote a track, and I danced to it. And from there, I started becoming this artist, J Kingdom. And there is where I let that be the outlet for that, you know, singing and dancing, full on choreography. And people were actually shocked that I could do it. Yeah. And I can maintain my breath, and I can sing while it's no tracks. Like, if you look on YouTube and you see those moments, I'm singing full on mic is on, and dancing.
So we can go to J Kingdom on YouTube, and you'll see all this good stuff.
Yeah, Voices of Destiny Choir.
There is the, you know, you're 5'2" Christian, you know, So we got the singing and the speaking, but ultimately we'll get to pastoring. But let's talk about preaching. How old were you when you first initially felt the call, accepted the call, in trial sermon?
Um, how old were you?
Trial sermon was 18. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been preaching since 18 too?
Yep. 18.
Hey man, we got a lot in common.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 8 years old when I did that theme
Mm-hmm.
was when I kind of felt like, oh, I think I'm gonna be a preacher.
I think at the first time I felt that was like 8.
Yeah.
It was weird. I think it was at a funeral. It was at a funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna be a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and that's completely not what I want to do. I'm like completely hurt. I'm like, are you kidding me? No way. That's gonna suck.
Yeah.
You know, so I suppressed that. Around 16 though,
Mm-hmm.
I just started feeling though the need to like speak again.
Yeah.
And to preach his word. I was very clear on that. Like I started looking at the pulpit, you know what I'm saying? And it's like I don't know, Lionel on Thundercats, you know, where the sword starts like calling your name. So I started looking at the pulpit and I started kind of feeling like, oh, I'm supposed to be up there. And I was like, oh no, I'm good. I'm straight. Especially at 16. So I was out and about doing all manner of sin and enjoying it, you know. But at 18, the Lord basically shut down everything in my life. Went to a revival. Pastor Kevin Hall was preaching, and I knew that I was starting to really feel called to preach because I don't know if this happened to you, but you could listen to preachers and you kind of be like, oh, if he say this, like they're going to go crazy. And then they not say it, and then you be like, oh. You're like, man, that's why.
Yeah.
And you be like,
Yeah, you get very analytical. So for me, it was a lot of subconscious stuff going on where I was, 13 or 14 going to revivals, not even knowing what call to preach or being a preacher meant. I just wanted to hear and analyze preaching. So when everybody else was asleep, I was listening, I was being analytical. I had set my
kind of like what
CD,
you do now.
my cassette. I set my radio. I manipulated my cassette player to. That's what I woke up to preaching. So I was listening to tapes. My friendships evolved after meeting people, to hearing preaching, but never in my mind did I know the vernacular or jargon
Right.
well enough to know, oh, this is a call.
Right.
This is where you're like. But it was definitely that feeling, but it wasn't until a while till I realized, like, oh, you get up in church and you tell people, you accept the call, you preach a trial sermon. So I didn't really know what to do with all that. I was just enjoying doing it with no, plans of expanding more than that with it.
Yeah, so my deal that I made with God as I started, I had 2 jobs at the time. They were great. I had a car and everything. So I was living the best life ever. And the guest evangelist told me the year before when I was 17, he was like, there's a call on your life. And I'm like, here you go with this spooky stuff, So I knew he was going to come this year and do that stuff again. So I told my dad I had to work so I wouldn't have to pick him up. And on Monday, they fired me. I walked in.
That says, yes, God is real.
Bruh, I walked in on Monday and they was like, yeah, can we see you for a minute? Sure, I was a supervisor too. Then they walked in and he said, yeah, the budget restraints, it's just hard around here. So we had to choose between you and this other guy that was working there, but he was there like 10 years before me. They was like, so we're going to let you go. He don't have a family. You have a family, your mom, your dad, you'll be fine. So I got fired. And I was like, all right, whatever, And so I went to my other job, which was at Bank of America, and they did a massive layoff. So I got fired on Monday from my first job. Tuesday, I got fired from Bank of America. I still wasn't going to go to the revival, right? My family didn't know I got fired. And so I was just going to just hang out every night. I had my own car. Yeah. And then my car just stopped running. This is not a lie. I'm not gassing this. This is exactly what happened. I tell this story all the time.
Yeah.
Car stops running, bruh.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm sitting here like, you got to be kidding me. So Friday, huge party was happening. And all my friends normally roll with me. They was like, hey, you going to pick us up? I was like, yeah, I am. And I had an appointment too, because that day I wanted to get a couple of piercings. So I was going to go hang out, drink, get some piercings, come back, shock my parents, that whole thing. And so I asked my dad, I was like, I need to use the car. Can I use the car? And my dad was like, sure, son. He's like, one condition. You got to go pick up the preacher first. You got to come to church tonight, and then you can use the car afterwards. I was like, all right, fine, whatever. So I told him, I was like, yeah, I got to go to church. It's dumb. I'll call y'all as soon as I get back home. We'll hook up afterwards. Picked the preacher up. The entire time he looked at me and was like, you can't run. And we're on the 110 freeway. He was staying at the Torrance Marriott. We're on the 110. He's like, son, you can't run. You're about to run out. And I'm sitting there like, I was like, hey man, trying to be respectful. Yes, okay. Get there. He preaches a sermon about Jonah. And, how God will take you and he will create an entire situation to engulf you if you just don't say yes, right? And the Holy Spirit hit me, man. And next thing I know, I was walking down the middle aisle, and I get to the middle aisle. My dad comes down, like the church is packed. And my dad kind of looks at me kind of like he knows. He was like, son, like, what are you down here for? And I'm like, I'm accepting my call to preach.
Wow.
Church goes crazy.
Wow.
My dad speaks in tongues.
Wow.
Now, my dad was a traditional Baptist pastor.
Yeah, gotcha.
I didn't even know he could do that.
Yeah.
Right. My dad's like, I was like, what is happening? What? Look at you. And he runs up the middle aisle. But the deal was that I made with God. I will preach. So when I said I accepted my call to preach, I meant preach a sermon. One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I was like, okay,
That's your way. Yeah.
Yeah, I will preach this sermon that I had in my spirit, Revelation chapter 3.
Of course. Yeah.
And then when I'm done,
You're done.
you'll let me go back.
Of course. That's how it works.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And God, God don't never say nothing. He just kind of like, sure.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
Of course. It's
Man,
always great to
Man, I've been
negotiate
preaching
with
ever
sovereignty.
since.
Yeah.
I've been preaching ever since. I'm going on, 25 or 27 years, something like that.
Yeah.
27 years preaching.
Yeah.
Ever since then. February 6th, 1998, 10 o'clock p.m. was when I got drafted into this.
Wow.
Man, that's how that happened.
How long before you preach your first sermon after that?
The next month.
The next month. Yeah.
Bruh, my dad shouts and speaks in tongues. Church is going up. At the end of the service, he says, and all of y'all come back March 1st. And I'm sitting there like, what? And we'll get into later about how my dad used to do this spontaneous stuff with me, and it would tick me off because that's how I became a pastor. But in this particular story, he gets up and he's like, oh, y'all come back March 1st. He's going to deliver his first sermon. I'm like, are you kidding? What? The heck? Like, I'm like,
what sermon was that? That was the Revelation 3 sermon.
Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3, Church of Sardis, I think it is. And my subject was Playtime is Over. And
the irony.
And
Yeah.
and everybody came out that night. I was scared to death. The whole city was in the room, bruh. Like Little Zion, which was the name of the church then. Imagine, bro, like people outside, right? Chairs down every aisle, like chairs in the front of the aisle, preachers in the old pulpit, like crammed together. Like there was nowhere to move. They're all here to hear Fisher's boy, deliver his first sermon. Like, anyway, it went well. I hooped. I hooped, and surprisingly, I didn't think I was going to, right? And that's what everyone was waiting on, because my dad was the, driver, and I did, and I walked the aisles and everything, like skipping down the aisles and hollering.
Yeah, because there's only one sermon you're gonna preach, so might as well give it
Is
your
it?
all.
Yeah.
Hold back.
Yeah, man. I told it all. I preached for 45 minutes. First sermon. Usually first sermon is like 15, 20 minutes.
10, 15 minutes.
45 minutes, I was in it. People shouting, they running down the aisle. I mean, people shouting to the point where you got to give them peppermints, because they sugar low, right? And I'm done, right? And then the Lord gives me another scripture. And I'm just like, oh, he's like, yeah, I want you to preach this next. And then my dad gets up and says, come back next Sunday. He's going to preach the 11 o'clock service. And literally, I've been preaching almost every week since March 1st, 1998.
Wow.
Yeah, every week. Sometimes more than
Obviously.
once a week, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. What was some of the challenges now, and this happens a lot when you get called to preach. God and people don't understand that. So preachers are imperfect, and people like, yeah, God doesn't really give us this like, now I want you to get your character together, and then I want you to be able to have your discipline together. And then after that, no, he's just like, no, you're going to do it now, and you'll learn on the job. It's like, go in there, make the burgers.
Yeah.
Where's my training? No training. No. Make the burgers.
Yeah, the burgers.
And people don't understand, like,
I never cooked before.
Yeah. You're blaming me for the stuff I'm doing, but like, he was the one that...
Like, blame him.
I was telling him. That's the thing I was saying to God. Like, I can't do this.
I told him specifically. I legitimately, The challenges, bro, was exactly what you're talking about, right? Was that I just got thrown all the responsibilities. No one took the time to train me to do anything. It actually, looking back, was like hurtful, actually. My dad, I understand why my dad did it later, because my father didn't want to be charged with, oh, you did this. So my dad intentionally took his hands off of me when I started preaching. He wouldn't help me with sermon prep, nothing. I was on my own. And then the preachers that were associate ministers at the church at the time, they all left. Literally the next Sunday, there was nobody there. And so I had to learn how to conduct the pulpit. I had to learn how to lead the church. I became now all of a sudden the preacher that my dad would throw it to if he was going out of town.
Right.
All of it, and no one was telling me what to do, bruh. It literally just learning how to pray, listen to God, and being, okay, God, I think this is what you're saying, so I'm just going to try it. And on top of that, the moral failures, you got to give up sex. That's crazy. Like, I was like, that's insane. I haven't been a virgin since I was like 12. Like, no. And so dealing with those struggles, smoking weed, drinking, still partying, clubbing. I was 18, as you know, being young. But because of who my dad was, right? A lot of places I would go that I had no business being, his members would be there. People would be there that knew me. So the challenge was that I would fall with eyes on me. And then I still had to stand up and preach. It was a struggle. The church gave me no grace. They automatically assume, of course, I'm a pastor's kid, so that's how y'all act. And just trying to find this thing out on my own. Being over a youth ministry on my own, nobody told me how to do that. No one told me, how to be a youth pastor. That was a brand new position in Little Zion at the time. So everything you guys see me do and everything I've done, literally was just following God, trusting His voice, because I did not have help.
Who was the other pastors, be it from a distance and preachers or up close, that you looked up to in those early stages?
During that time, because I'm a Baptist boy, so Dr. J. Benjamin Hardwick, still my uncle. Love him. To know him is to love him. So I looked up to him, of course, Praise of Zion and Western Baptist State Convention. I, of course, admired Noel Jones, Bishop Noel Jones, who at that time in the late 90s, he was just killing LA, I looked up to Bishop Omer, who is now my spiritual father, ironically, and there's a story in that too. And during that time, I looked up to Pastor Xavier Thompson, because I think he was like 23 or something like that. And he was a young pastor doing it. And of course, Pastor H.B. Charles. Now, H.B. Charles' dad and my dad were like best friends. Yeah. So Pastor H.B. Charles and I and Pastor Monroe, we would all hang out when our parents would come over to each other's houses. Wow. Pastor H.B. Charles gave me my first book. And that's when his office was in the basement, underneath. And gave me the first book. And from time to time, he would call and check on me just to make sure I was okay, because he understood the pressure I was under. Yeah. But those were kind of the guys locally that I did look up to.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Now let's go into the journey of becoming pastor.
Yes. Prison.
But before we do that, you mentioned something, and I think we need to come back and have a bigger conversation about that. I'm preaching on divorce. I'm in the midst of a series called "I Can't Believe the Pastor's Talking About This."
Oh, I love it.
So we talked about rape and suicide, rape and sexual assault one Sunday.
That's good.
Grief, loneliness. Last Sunday was suicide. This Sunday is divorce. And you mentioned about, being a virgin and things of that nature. And in part of the sermon on suicide, I spoke directly to the LGBTQIA plus community as it relates to knowing the suicide rate that's connected to that community and the church being liable and contributing to that ever growing, constantly growing rate amongst that community. And in that also, I acknowledged to that group, I told the church, I'm not talking to you. So, this ain't, you're not going to like what I'm about to say. So this ain't for you anyway. Right. So, and if you do, I don't care anyway. Right. But that the church felt we love to talk about those sins, but we don't talk about sexuality in general. Correct. And then as adults, we still struggle with what sexuality in general is, even though you may not struggle in that category that's so taboo socially in church, not as much in the world as it used to be, but the world acts like they never was there either too. Like, that's always interesting as well. But as it relates to young people and the church and dealing with sexuality, is that something you've thought about, something you've addressed? And another point that I made in the sexual assault sermon is that we string people to make sure that they don't have any charges, but we don't teach the kids that we're stringing how to identify and predators and overcome. Is that something that you've ever formally talked about or formally thought about how to address with young people? Because you have such a powerful and prolific voice among young Christians.
Yeah. So my ministry has always been transparent. And it's funny because as I don't want to call it coming back on the scene. That's crazy, right? I've always been here, right? But it does seem like God seems to be just lately kind of rebranding me, or like just bringing me back
Mm-hmm.
amongst everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We're being on the radio the other day and all of that good stuff. Anywho, one of the things that I told the Lord was like, okay, we're going to do this. Then we do this with full transparency. So with what you just asked, I have addressed it. I have talked about it. You know, I have myself gone through being, assaulted, and the things that comes with that, and I have been, I had a nephew who he passed away, and he was a part of the community, and I watched the church shun him, even family shun him in the worst way. And I just didn't see the grace and the love of God. And so what I've done is I have created a very open and transparent culture at Greater Zion, that it doesn't matter what you're dealing with, no matter what your struggles might be, here is a safe space for you to process through that. However, please understand, we also want to transform you, right? So we're not an affirming church. We're not an affirming ministry of any sin, right? We don't want to make that sin firm. However, we are accepting of the person who is processing through that sin.
Yeah, I use that exact language. Yeah, I use that exact language. Yeah. We're non-affirming, but we're accepting. And then I said, I offer myself personally, hey, if you're looking for a safe place to struggle through these things with, and you don't ever have to leave the community, but if you're willing to struggle through these things, I want to be that safe place. I want to be that trusted friend. A lot of people don't understand, like, when you start making these statements, a lot of people that's saying amen to the Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve,
right,
are disguised amens of who are dealing with those similar struggles. And until you have, well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the work you've done in that, because like I said in the suicide sermon, when you love people, you don't know who life you just saved.
Right.
By just saying, the person that's fully aware of their mistakes, is the person who made the mistake.
Right.
So when I see you make a mistake and I highlight it further, be it publicly or privately, you're just enhancing what's already in me,
right,
thus leading me to this place of turmoil,
right,
that eventually leads people to either attempting or taking their own life, or living in this constant struggle of those suicidal thoughts, which leads to violence sometimes towards other people. And so, I mean, that's such a significant thing. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this series is because Ain't He All Right is appropriate and needed. People need that. People need the Lord is my shepherd.
Right.
People need, weeping may endure for a night and joy come in the morning.
Yeah.
But most of us spend the majority of our life walking down the lane of, how do I deal with me?
Yeah.
And born in sin, shaping in iniquity. I think of John 9, and we throw the man born blind parents under the bus because they said, talk to him, he's of age.
Yeah.
But we fail to forget, like, they're saying he's of age because they have been addressing these for probably 18, 19, 20 years.
Yeah.
And now they're saying he's at the age of accountability. We walked through that.
Yeah.
And the person that have never, loved a special needs child won't understand the empathy for that statement that they make.
I think that it's, I love that whole concept of like living in the nuance, understanding that everything is not black and white, right?
It's not.
And then they love to use the Bible very ignorantly to try to prove the point that it is, right? But it's not. You have moments that are very black and white, right? You have an encounter with the Lord. Something has happened. Conviction has awakened you. But that process of walking that thing out, though, that's going to take a little bit longer.
That's the part that people get confused about black and white. Like, it can be black and white.
Yes.
But I'm not. So walking out that which is black and white becomes nuance, becomes
Well, what's crazy? Not to cut you off, Hurt.
No. Go ahead. That's what we're here for.
Here's the thing that's interesting about it is because we love to preach that initial moment when that black and white moment happens. So, for example, right, the woman caught in the act of adultery, and then he says, "Where are your accusers? They're not here." Great. So she's done, right? And he says, "Go and sin no more." Now it becomes gray. We don't really know how she did when she left.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, she lived a whole life of obviously fooling around with men. You know, was she successful in that? Was she not? Right. And the reason why I think it's left vague like that is because it goes back to what we're talking about, that these encounters, they are black and white. It's like God showed up. God showed you your potential. God spoke to your need. God did give you the power to, you know, to raise yourself back up so you won't jump off a bridge. You won't kill yourself. But I think the other part of it that has to be preached is, but when you leave this church and when you leave this altar experience and you go and try to walk this thing out of go and sin no more, it's not going to be as black and white. It's not going to be that easy. And for me, that has been the core of my ministry. I have, if anyone has ever, because I get titled with like, here come Fisher, here he come with this, you know, he hate the church and this, that, and the other. And it's really not, that's not the truth. I hate the pretentiousness that we find in church. I hate even more the pretentiousness that we find in preachers. And so what people get from me, the tone that they get from me is this lack of transparency, you know. So when we see people in these churches and we tell them, now you get up and don't touch it again, you know good and well that that's not necessarily the case. How do you know, Pastor? Because you haven't gone and not touched it again. You know, so I think that when we have these conversations, this is when we get into it being real. It's a real gospel. You know, it's a honest gospel, except for that, and not that pretentious version of it. So I don't have a problem bringing up like my separation and going through that. It's a thing. It happens. And it happens with pastors. And sometimes people don't stay together. There are pastors who have baby mamas. It's a thing. Get over it. If you can sing in the choir and direct and you got a baby mama and 3 baby mamas, then he can stand up there and he can preach as well, right? So I don't have a problem talking about it. I think it needs to be talked about more and more. So
yeah, it's, you know, I always look at David. David beautifully after Bathsheba breaks beautifully Psalm 32.
Yeah, he
you
does.
know, cleanse me, and you know, and blessed is the name of sins are covered. Psalm 51, have mercy on me, O Lord.
Purge me with hyssop.
But the end of David's life, when David was sick, they said, well, they didn't bring in IVs, they didn't bring in a life, they didn't do a test.
Who they bring in?
They brought in some virgin girls
to make sure,
and they laid them in the bed with the king.
And
they said, "Come here, baby." Now, did the king try to touch you? No. Did the king try? No.
He dead.
King dead, y'all. So obviously there was still that going on with David. That the people said the way to measure if the king is alive is
how he responds to virgins.
How they respond to virgin girls.
Virgin girls.
Yeah. This is still the David. This is the blessed is the man. Have mercy, cleanse me with hyssop.
We sing all of his lyrics.
Yes. That means that he was constantly being dumped and being refilled. That was, you know, the woman caught in the act of adultery is beautiful. We can romanticize and spiritualize and think every time she was tempted, she thought about how Jesus loved her, and she couldn't go in there because, you know.
But how about what kept her was when she fell again, and this is all a hypothesis, so y'all don't kill her and don't kill me.
Right.
But what if she fell again, and what got her through it was the statement of, "Where are your accusers?"
Where are your accusers?
I'm just saying.
And the person that could have accused you, the only person in human history that could have accused you based off of that criteria, did not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that brings you back home, as it brings the prodigal son ultimately back home to his dad. Well, pastoring. You have been pastoring how long now?
I've been pastoring. Next year will be 20 years.
20 years.
20 years, bro. That's a long time.
How did that happen?
So, not to hear a story, here we go. Same guy I was talking about 10 minutes ago, Dr. David Jerome Fisher, and his spontaneity. I go to church the third Sunday in March of 2004. It is his birthday celebration. He is bringing in Pastor Mark Williams from Faith Fellowship, Corona.
Yeah.
And a lot's going on this day. Something unusual is in the house because that day my dad gets convicted of the Holy Spirit and decides to let the woman preacher that was Pastor Mark's associate pastor to come in the pulpit. We lose it because we're like, what? God is in the building. I'm like, Dad, are you about to die today? You know, like that's just unheard of in the traditional Baptist church, especially back in 2004, right? Anyway, Pastor Mark preaches, he gets finished. My dad gets up and says, I got another announcement. He was like, oh, son, stand up. So I stand up. He was like, I found our next pastor, right? So I'm looking like, thank God, I'm ready to go. You know, I wanted to go to Morehouse College. You know, I was finishing up at Cal State Long Beach, so I was like, I'll transfer. You know, I'm about to go live my life because I only stayed back to help my dad. But now that he got help,
Yeah.
he shot top, right? And he says, it's him, it's my son. Yeah, Michael, you're the pastor. You're the pastor. I looked in, I was praying the other day, and I asked God to reveal to me who would take over Little Zion. And he said, look through the window, through the door. And he looked through the window, and he saw me vacuuming the floor.
Wow.
After I would go to school, I would come and I would vacuum. I would straighten up the chairs. I wanted the sanctuary to look right. And
Young preacher, did you hear that? Young preacher, did you hear that? Yes.
here you go.
Because the ones that get it will get it by me saying that. The ones that don't get it, what are you talking about?
Never had it.
And it ain't no hope
Right.
for them anyway.
So and actually I'm glad you brought that up because I do tell a selected few people when they ask me of how I became the pastor was the Holy Spirit told my dad, that's what my dad said, any person that cares enough about coming and running the vacuum and sweeping up the sanctuary and he don't have to, and he's doing that for the people, you can trust him with the church. And that was the deciding factor. Not my degrees. The deciding factor wasn't my charisma when I preached. The deciding factor wasn't how I was flipping the church when I was closing it dock. The deciding factor of me becoming the pastor of a legendary church was because I was running the vacuum and straightening up chairs every single day. And so anyway, he named me the pastor and told them, everyone that he said, so majority of the church is here. So let's take a vote right now by the bylaws. Everyone that agrees that he should be the pastor, stand up. Now me, I thought definitely this is where it was going to go in my favor. Because I was like, yeah, they remember me. They know I don't really like them. A lot of them don't really like me, you know. So this is going to go over great. They're not going to stand up. The whole church stood up. It was a unanimous decision. He was like, are there any nays? I was like, okay, here we go. Now somebody, please, no nays. He says unanimous. He pointed to Sister Ethel Hargraves, who was the church secretary at the moment. She wrote it down in the minutes, and then they had a notary that was there. And they sealed it, and then he took some masking tape and put it up over his name, over the banner, you know, when they used to do those banners back in the day, and say, I'm no longer the pastor as of today. He is the pastor. So next Sunday when you come, he's your new pastor, and sat down.
Wow.
And that's how I became the pastor of Greater Zion Church Family. And that night when we got home, I had words. I was like, what the heck was that? What are you didn't discuss this with me at all. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Like, I'm not ready to be nobody's pastor. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to run this whole ship into the ground. That man looked at me and threw me the keys and said, well, that's your problem now. So everyone that's listening that be so quick to be like, oh, I wish I was Fisher, and oh my God, he got handed the situation, silver spoon, and all of that stuff. That's not how that went. I legitimately got thrown. Same thing with how I became the preacher. Thrown then. It was thrown to me, and then becoming the pastor, thrown to me, and my dad was done. That man was finished. and reared back in his chair and watched the game. And was like, you can go talk to your mama. I'm done. And he was never the pastor again. That was it. And they would call him. He was like, no, he's the pastor. The next year, they installed me. He got up. He preached his final sermon as the pastor. And his words were, I will stay here as long as I can to swim between you and the sharks. And yeah. Now, I had no seminary training. None. At all. No seminary education, none of that. And here I am, 24 years old, pastoring one of the most notable Black churches in the city of Los Angeles, in the country. I was wild. I was temperamental. You know, I was angry because this church had brought me a lot of pain, you know, and then all of a sudden I got to lead these people. It was crazy times.
What was a turning point for you in those early years?
It wasn't for a while. I mean, God was just, he was merciful. He was gracious. Despite my foolery, you know, and even though I wasn't handling it right, man, the church was growing. It was just phenomenally just blowing up. And I think it was one day, we was at like 3-4 services, and one day I looked out the window upstairs from my office, and I saw a woman walk into church, and she was on a cane. And you could tell it was hard for her to walk. And she was walking to church. And I said to myself, that woman thinks enough of me, and she trusts that I have spent time with God, that I'm going to give her what she needs to make it through another week of having to walk like that. And at that moment was when I said, grow up. You know, stop being mad that you were put here. And how about you be grateful that you were chosen?
Wow.
And from there, it turned.
What are some of the things that you started to do that was different?
I started interacting with the people. You know, that's the first thing. I started caring more. I started being more present and just really, you know, wanting to know the people I was pastoring and not just treating them as like a gig, you know, as a preaching engagement every week. And that alone helped to grow and change the culture of Greater Zion. The second thing was I started to go to different fellowships and convocations and stuff so I can start to learn and expand, so that I would have the tools I needed to be able to pastor these people. I started listening again to the wisdom of my father, and started seeking the wisdom of others as my dad got older. Went back to school, got my master's of divinity, and I just started preparing myself and getting all the tools I needed to be able to do this right. So that old lady, and she's gone to glory now, that when she walks to church limping the way she's limping, that she's not disappointed by what she hears and what she sees from her pastor.
Wow. That's crazy, man. You're there. Eventually the church shifts the names. What's the story behind that?
Bishop Kenneth C. Omer is the story behind that. It's May 4th, 2008 or 2009. He comes to my anniversary. This is a good story too. This is Bishop Kenneth C. Omer, bro. This is right. And I'm telling everybody, yo, Bishop Omer is getting ready to come. Let's be here on Friday night. Bruh, no one comes. the church doesn't come. Like, it's empty in there. It's like 150 people sitting in there. I'm embarrassed, right? But they were a new crop of people. They didn't know about Bishop Omer, right? Anyway, he didn't care. He preached, did his thing, and then he prophesied and said, you can no longer call this little, because it will only be what you call it. It's greater. And so then I went back and I talked to my dad about changing the name, and then he said he always wanted to change the name. But during his time, to take the word Baptist off would have been crucifixion for him. But he never felt that we were ever just a traditional Baptist church, because we always flowed in the different gifts and stuff. You know, my dad didn't. And so after talking to my dad and realizing that he always wanted to change the name, and then talking to Bishop Omer, and Bishop Omer told me, before you do anything, teach it. So that was my first time I started doing series. Except but then I was doing the whole preaching a new sermon every time I got up, which was crazy. That's so stupid. And I did a whole series on like the names, right? Whenever God would change someone's name and what it meant and where they were going, and they forecasted this, that, and the other. And when I got finished with that series, I told them, so we're changing our name, Greater Zion Church Family. So it's still Zion, greater. So we believe we do greater works. It's a church, obviously, but we're all about family, community. So
powerful. What has been some of the more impactful things that you've done as relates to collaboration with the city of Compton that stands out to you in these years?
Our job with the sheriffs. You know, I partner with every captain that has led the sheriff's department in Compton. The Lord has granted us and me favor with most of them, thank God. We pray over them every year. We service them. We go over there and feed them during their night shift. As a result of those relationships, we've been able to actually be a part of talking policy, how you handle the community. We've helped them to change their language with the community when they pull people over. We've gotten rid of the whole flashing the light. Pastor Tevin that's here, that was the youth pastor. He's been with me. I don't know, were you in the room with me when I made the captain apologize? Can you
tell us about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this guy, you know how the popos do around here. You know, I was driving away from an anniversary service, and my deacon was driving me in my car, my Tahoe. Yes, the windows were tinted. Yes, I have rims. Yes, right. But he pulled us over, but walked up to us, and they walked up on us with guns drawn and was like harassing. And I was like, yo, like, you don't have to do all this. Shut up. Get out the car. I'm in a suit. And I'm like, you don't have to do this. Like, so then eventually I was like, you have no idea who you like are harassing right now. I don't give a care. Like, he cussing at me and everything. My mom was in the back seat. That's what ticks me off. He made her get out the car. And I'm like, oh yeah, you fired. Like, in my head, I'm like, it's done. I text the captain right then and was like, yeah, your deputies is over here tripping. They cussing at me. They got guns drawn. They radioed it in. He was like, oh, you know what? We saw it. You drove a vehicle that looked like somebody that did a robbery. I said, no, it didn't. So I called the captain and said, we have to rectify this. Like, you ain't going to just let them slide. I want a meeting. So we had a meeting, brought him in, and basically, make a long story short, the captain made his deputy apologize to me for how he conducted himself. So things like that have helped to move the needle, at least in Compton, in how the sheriff's department has dealt with the community. So I think that that's significant for me because, again, going all the way back to the beginning of this interview, growing up, we remember just how volatile the relationship was between police and community.
Growing up in Detroit, I became familiar with Compton because of the rap scene and the musicians that come out of here. Have you had any interactions or from the Kendrick Lamars today to the old school of Eazy-E and so on?
So I do know Eazy-E's son. You know, but Eazy-E was gone way before, you know, and then Ice Cube, he doesn't really come back. But
Ice Cube's not from Compton.
He's originally not from Compton,
so,
yeah. But Dr. Dre has done a lot of work in the city of Compton. I haven't had a chance to meet him firsthand. Kendrick and I met when they gave him the key to the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the opening prayer for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we worked on a couple of projects, but never met. So we was a part of this series on Vice. I don't know what station that is, but they did a whole documentary about Compton and the evolving of Compton. So I know that we are always in the same circles, right? Even though I haven't necessarily met them, but we all know of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that comes from common people who will be like, yeah, oh yeah, they know who you are. Our church is just known. I mean, if you grew up in Compton,
mm-hmm.
my dad did a good job in making sure that we would be a light that shines bright.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of them. I'm proud of what they're doing, especially Kendrick Lamar, man. I love how he's using his platform to speak for the people that can't speak for themselves.
Yeah. What's on your plate? I know we talked about the conference earlier. What's some of the other things that you're passionate about in these coming days, weeks, months, and years?
Well, now that we're getting older, I'm passionate. I'm passionate about discipleship, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this until I'm old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know your goals and everyone else's goals, but I'm not dying in the pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually want to use maybe the next 15 years, 20 if they pray real hard, and just know I'm praying against that. But 15 years of just discipling and raising up the next generation, pouring into them the things that I've learned, and preparing them to be able to take the reins and move it forward. And also with the branding piece, the Fisher brand, which you guys can go to www.thefisherbrand.com if you need any help in branding consultation. I'm really passionate about that, helping people to brand themselves so that the world as a large, the marketplace, which I believe is where the next move of God really is going to happen, will be receptive to the church. But they got to fix some stuff so that they look presentable.
Absolutely.
They slip is showing. So that's what I'm passionate about, man. And then lastly, just getting stronger and strengthening relationships like this. You know me enough to know that I can be an island real easy.
Yeah.
You know, and for those that's listening, Hurt has always been like, man, Fish, let's hang out, let's just stand together, even though he don't mean it. But let's hang out. And then I'm the one that'll pull away. But so I want to use the next like 15 years to really like reestablish those relationships.
As I said earlier, that's some form of bullying. I'm not sure what it is. It's some form of bullying / trolling / making stuff up. They got a word in there called lying for that. But I definitely feel that same thing as it relates to insulating yourself, using busyness, not to cultivate relationships as an excuse, and really is really, and for those that's maybe listening not understand the statement, don't worry about it. Preachers are all we got is each other, and so when we are not in fellowship with each other, when we're not in partnership with each other. And that doesn't mean coming your anniversary, exchanging checks and stuff like that.
Right.
It means just, how you doing?
Yes.
Let's go get something to eat. Let's laugh. Let's talk about ministry. Then sometimes let's not talk about ministry.
Right.
Let's talk about life, but let's sometimes not talk about life.
Right.
And being more conscious and doing that, because it's easy for us to use preaching, counseling, pastoring, XYZ, all these other endeavors as an excuse and as an escape, excuse and escape.
Because we're all going through the same thing.
Exact same thing.
We're going through the same thing. And you don't really realize how much you need the preacher until it's your turn. And every preacher, if you are listening, you will have a turn. Yeah. It's never if. It's never if. And that's what I'll tell anyone. It's never if you're going to have a turn. It's never if they're going to leave you. It's never if something's going to come out about you or be made up about you. It's never if, it's when. You will have a turn. And so what I've learned is that when you isolate yourself and you put yourself on an island, especially when things are good and you think you're untouchable, then when you have your turn, it's really hard to get through it.
Yeah, it's that dark night feeling, you know.
Yeah, man.
Either you die and become the hero, live long enough and become the villain.
Right.
If you here long enough, your good is going to be equated to evil. Your bad is going to be accentuated to evil, more evil than what it really was. The the thing that they would do for their favorite celebrity, their cousin, and humanization and empathy will not be also shared with you. However, how much you may have so, it's like, man, I should just snitch on all y'all because I didn't work through stuff with you, be it your family, your finances, your marriage.
Yeah.
And so now that the shoe is now on the other foot, and how pastors and preachers, and certainly you alluded to that, kids are treated in the context of the church because they'll do stuff to the kids that they know not to do or were dared not to do to the pastor or the pastor's wife. Sometimes they do it to the pastor's wife as well. That they'll do that to the children as their vehicle of vengeance. And so is back to our initial statement that we need each other because we understand that's what we signed up for.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that when you signed up, you'll eventually.
Oh no,
you'll find out.
Oh no. You find out.
You'll find out real quick.
Yeah. No. You're gonna find out.
You'll find out.
Don't worry about it. No.
You'll find out real quick.
Yeah. You on the menu? You just don't know it yet.
Yeah. I heard. I didn't hear it, but they were quoting T.D. Jakes at a conference, and it said, conference of preachers. He said, if you were smart, if I threw my keys to my church to you, you'll throw it right back.
You would. That's good.
The higher you get, quote unquote, on how we measure higher in very superficial ways, I may add, the more those things are accentuated. So that's even desperate, or even deeper, and the more profound need for those relationships and partnerships. I'm in the midst of 6 weeks, 6 weeks with a 6-week back sabbatical right now. And, we talked about transparency. Before taking this sabbatical, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was just, this gotta be what death felt like. Not sick, not medically from a medical standpoint, not really a mental health type of thing. It just felt
burnt out.
Burnt out meets overwhelmed meets I want to slap somebody meets, am I really low self-esteem? Am I really impacting? Is it time to look other places, do other things as relates to ministry contacts? Am I being helpful? Am I being impactful? A lot of times people don't understand, like, when you look at our crowds, it's not that we're trying to, we're branding ourselves better, but it comes to the point where you may be like, they're not listening to me. That's why they're not here. They don't care about what I say.
Exactly. You start taking things personal, but that's because we're not healed a lot of times from a lot of things. When we talk about we just skipped on some of the things I went through, like growing up, right? The problem that I didn't realize until I went to counseling was I was pastoring and I had never dealt with my own trauma. The problem that happens if you don't deal with your trauma when you pastor, you start pastoring from your trauma and not even knowing it. You start taking things personal. You start applying that what's happening in your church is a remix of what happened with your family, things of that nature. So, you reach a point where you don't process and then you reach burnout. So I'm glad you're taking the sabbatical. I take them now whenever I feel like it. Greater Zion knows there's no guarantee that you're going to see me. And they appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I throw people up there. I'm like, good luck. Go ahead. Preach. Get your study on. I mean, we've done it, man, since 18 years old. Come on now. Take as many sabbaticals as you need because we need the healthiest version of you.
Yeah. What led you to go and seek counseling?
Oh, yeah, because I definitely was going to hurt somebody, for sure. As you know, for a long time, you guys would keep getting the angry version of me.
Mhm.
You know, I would come into the conference ready for it. You know, I would give anybody the gas. You know, and I was the guy to do it. You know, there's a couple of times you would see me like, dang, Fish, you didn't have to do that guy like that. You know, one particular preacher, I won't say nothing to. You know, I slapped his hand when he tried to shake my hand outside the conference. You know, but yeah, I needed to go find out what was that. What is that?
Wow.
And the altar calls weren't doing it,
Mhm.
right? So I went to counseling and I prayed, and God led me to a counselor that I've been with ever since 2019. I knew I really needed to go get counseling when my father passed because I wasn't grieving properly.
Wow.
And since then, it's the best thing that could have happened to me. Unlocked a lot of things. I forgave myself about a lot of stuff, took charge of a lot of stuff, and I started handling certain things that needed to be handled over here, so I didn't have to play that out over there.
Jeez.
And so I'm sitting here going off on you because the truth of the matter is I haven't advocated for myself to my older brother over here. You see? And so when I started putting all that stuff in place, so I love it now, man. So I go to counseling. I sure do. I go every week too.
Well, praise God, man. Thank you
Thank
for
you, man.
that. Where can people find you? Where can people find the church? How can
Yes.
people get connected? Social media handle, address, website, social security number, cell phone, height, weight, date of birth, whatever you got to do is your time, bro.
Is this Tinder or Nuance?
I don't know what that is.
Then why'd you laugh?
I don't know. Man.
Right,
It's
yeah, whatever.
organic.
Ultimate Warrior. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, I'm 5 and I'm just playing. You can get in touch with me on Instagram. That's where I am. I'm not on Facebook. Done with that. I'm on Instagram though under Michael J.T. Fisher. All right, Michael J.T. Fisher. And then as far as the website for my LLC is www.thefisherbrand.com. And you can hire me to be a consultant for any of your branding needs for either yourself, your staff, your ministry, or your business. Then as far as the church is concerned, in Compton, we're located at 2408 North Wilmington Avenue, Compton, California, right there on El Segundo and Wilmington at the entrance of the city of Compton. And our service times are every Sunday at 9:30 a.m. And on first Sundays, we do 9:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. And then for all our other campuses, you just go to our website at www.gzcfamily.org. All right. And if you want to give, you can go there too.
Yes, sir.
You'll be a blessing as well. So
Good-
those are the
good-
places
good
that you can
side.
find
Good
me.
ground,
Yeah,
good
no
ground.
phone numbers for you.
Good ground, and so on. Listen, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Nuanced Conversations. Be on the lookout for upcoming episodes and way that you can support this media company as well, and the various things that we're trying to do for the glory of the Lord. Thank you to our beloved guest today for sharing with us not just information, but himself, and so many will be blessed by him doing so. God bless y'all. We out.